If you could all take a seat, we need to get started. We have a busy evening planned. Good evening. Democracy requires inquiry and participation, so thank you to the audience here and for those who will be watching the recording at home. And thank you to our candidates for participating this evening. My name is Rebecca Fricka, and I am the spokesperson for the Amherst League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, non-political organization whose mission is to encourage informed and active citizen participation in government. That means we do not we don't support candidates, but we do support positions. We are partnering tonight with Amherst Media, who is recording this event. Thank you so much, Amherst Media. Some quick voting announcements. Friday, October 27th is the last day to register to vote by 5 p.m. The second announcement is that the Amherst districts have been shifted a little, so if you do not know or you think, I encourage you all to look at the new district maps. My former counselor pointed out that I am now in a new district and I didn't realize it, so check it out. They're posted out in the lobby, and they're also going to be in the voter's guide that the League is publishing. And finally, voting at the polls for Amherst biennial election is November 7th. Our first hour will be for district candidates, and the second hour will be for at-large candidates. As a reminder, voters will be asked to select 3 candidates for at-large and 2 for their district. For the first hour on stage, we have 13 district candidates from districts 1, 2, 3, and 4. District 5 is uncontested, so they cannot participate in tonight's forum, but you can read a little bit about them in our voter guide. I will now turn you over to our moderator for the evening, Amherst League member Kathy Campbell, who is, by the way, a citizen of Leverett. So thank you so much for coming.
Would the candidates please come up? While they're coming up, let me just go through a few of the remarks for tonight. We'll be taking questions from the audience. We have received some questions via email in advance, but we're also taking questions this evening. So if you have a question, please write it down on an index card. I hope there were index cards being passed out at the entrance, and hold it up in the air, and one of our collectors will pick it up. If you need a card or a pencil, just raise your hand. There are people in the back to take care of you. Every question must be addressed to all the candidates, and each will get 90 seconds to answer. The order of the answers by candidates has been randomized to ensure fairness. However, in this first hour, we will group responses by district. Okay, so now that we're all seated, let me go through the candidates. We have from District 1, Fricka Eddy and Vincent O'Connor. And Kathy Shane is the third candidate. She was not able to join us tonight, but I will read her closing statement when we come to closing statements. From District 2, we have, a little bit along there, Lynn Griesemer, Pat DeAngelis, Amber Cano-Martin, and Allegra Clark. From District 3, we have George Ryan, Patrick Dunn, and Heather Lord. And from District 4, Annika Lopes, Jennifer Taub, Dylan Maxfield, and Pamela Rooney. So as I mentioned, each candidate, besides answering questions, will also have an opportunity to make a 1-minute closing statement at the end. We have timekeepers sitting up here in the front. They have 10 They have 30-second and 15-second signs and a stop sign. Please, candidates, wrap up your answer when you see the stop sign.
Can I ask for a clarification?
Yes, please.
Some counselors didn't get the information. How long do we have to answer a question?
You will have 90 seconds to answer each question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we always get more questions than can be answered in the time allotted. The questions are being sorted by our sorters down here, who are looking for questions to reduce repetition and ensure that the questions are suitable for all candidates and to cover as much as possible in the allotted time. So to the audience, please notice where the exits are and please silence your cell phones. Don't use flash cameras and no beeping watches. Thank you. And also, please remain quiet throughout the forum and hold your applause till after the closing statements. Thank you. Let's begin. So thank you, candidates, and welcome. And thank you for your time to come before the public tonight. Let's see, I need to... Our first question is, what do you think the specific concerns of your district are, and how will you want to address them? We're going to start with District 4, and Ms. Rooney, would you please start off for District 4?
Certainly, thank you. I'm Pam Rooney, District 4. The major concerns for District 4 are sidewalks and streets that are walkable and passable for as many people as possible to get in and out of downtown. Part of this is because we have a number of people living who don't necessarily have cars and do not have access to food. Amherst is a food desert, by the way, and having good sidewalks and an improved transit system is going to make a huge difference for these folks. Another concern for District 4 is the lack of housing and the pressure on our housing by the students of UMass who have nowhere to live because they cannot all fit onto campus. So the pressures that are put on specifically close to campus create some real hardships that allow other people, I can't read this line, 30 seconds, thank you. Put real pressure on the availability of housing for working households and families. Thank you.
Ms. Lopes?
Thank you. So in addition to what Mr. Rooney just said, I am a District 4 downtown baby. I grew up downtown on Amity Street before Amity Place, and I really understand a lot of the unique challenges to this district. I think a lot of it really, solutions rather, really rely on collaborative relationships between our student population, the university especially, and our non-student residents. We have a lot of potential to collaborate in ways that we can ensure that college students are having a full college experience while our residents have the right to, peace and quiet, not, trash everywhere. And I think that, we really need to focus on the fact that many of us have come to the area and we're drawn here because of the university and the colleges. So with making sure that we are able to uphold the benefits and not throw them all away due to behaviors, I think that we need to add more people to the table with these discussions. Thank you so much.
We have the candidates take a microphone when it's their turn to speak, please.
As in hold it in our hand?
Or just really like this? Okay.
Okay. Is Dylan Maxfield not here?
He's not.
Oh, I got to take that into account. Okay, Ms. Dow.
Yeah, I'm Jennifer Taub. Thank you. So to pick up on what both Anika and Pam just said, our District 4 are 2 campus and downtown adjacent districts. So we're a very unique and rich district. We have the only 2 general residence or RG zoning districts in Amherst, and those districts are already zoned for the greatest density and variety of housing stock of any of the residential areas in town. So we are already zoned, much of the district, for single-family duplex, triplex, townhouse, and apartments. We are a multi-generational neighborhood. We have been living, with, students and non-student households for decades. But we do have a lot of pressure. Well, since I've been on the council, I've really had to fiercely advocate to not rezone the general residence districts for even greater density. We can already have 9 houses per acre with 36 residents. Any more than that would really make it not a viable neighborhoods for non-student residents. So we need to maintain the balance, a viable, healthy balance between our student and non-student residents.
Thank you. Moving on to District 1, Mr. Adey.
Thank you. If I got the question correctly, it is, what are the specific concerns of my district and how do I intend to solve them? I think we've heard enough answers. You might have forgotten the question. For District 1, one of those issues is definitely going to be housing. Another is development and, of course, the roads. If ever you've been in District 1, there's just a nightmare on one of those roads. If you've been there, you'll know. How I intend to solve that is by partnership. There are already organizations and groups in District 1 that are working towards some of the issues related to development and housing. And they have already produced some reports having looked at the master plan. I don't think we need to rework what has been done, but simply to work with those who are already looking at those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. O'Connor.
Well, the concerns that are visible are, one, the need for road repair on some of our roads, and road use, especially at the North Amherst intersection, where a lot of folks who are coming from the north use Sunderland Road to enter the intersection instead of using 116 and going all the way to the university. That situation has got to be solved. Everyone who's trying to drive through that intersection at 8, 9 in the morning and at night knows the problem. The second is school budgets. The council should be the final decider of the school budget without having to be forced to make cuts in the middle of June to the manager's budget. I've talked to the manager about it. I've said to him, and I think it's correct, that an unelected administrator should not be making the final decision about the school budget or making it so difficult for the council to do it. Finally, there is the buying up of single-family homes by out-of-town investors. We have to do something about that because otherwise we will have an even more serious problem than we do now.
Thank you. Moving on to District 3, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. First, just a brief geography lesson. District 3 stretches from the edge of the top of UMass campus, Commonwealth College, all the way down to Bay Road. So keep that image in your mind. Also, 82% of the people in District 3 are new to District 3. So I've been spending the last month basically making my way from the southern edge all the way up to the north just to meet people. And the things I've heard are not completely different from some of the things that you've been hearing this evening. Poor condition of roads and sidewalks, no question about that. A general perception of some that they're continuously rising taxes but diminishing services. The impact of student rentals on neighborhoods is definitely something I've heard a fair amount about. And then also dismay at the lack of civility in public discourse. Those are kind of 4 themes that I noted. There are also some specific things that relate to the District 3. Speed limits, I have personal experience. I can testify on Pomeroy Lane, Shea Street, parts of West Street, East Hadley Road, and Potwine Lane. The seriously corroded bridge that crosses the Ford River. It's both an eyesore and a safety hazard. Public access to Hickory and to the bus shelter on East Hadley Road, which we could use. So a number of things.
Thank you. Mr. Drum.
Thank you. So as with what George has mentioned, I've also gone through the neighborhoods and have spoken to many. And again, I've noticed the same themes where the lack of access to sidewalks, the lack of access to Hickory Ridge especially. I know that has been a huge topic of discussion. I don't know if any of you have been over there recently, but it's impossible to get in there without getting covered in ticks. Beyond that, also the student rentals, several people in the neighborhood behind me, for instance, are existing renters, their families, young families, and trying to get a house is next to impossible because all of the entry-level homes in the area are immediately bought up by landlords for rent. Also, the disrepair of municipal buildings has been a huge topic of conversation, specifically around the DPW and the fire station. I know there are plans for potentially putting the fire station in my district. It would actually be across the street from my house is the current plan. And I think that has been a massive topic of conversation. I would love some additional input on those topics. Thank you.
Ms. Lord.
Yes, hello, thank you. I'm talking about specific concerns in District 3, and I'm going to focus on the apartment complex, where there are 6 apartments, and I'm sure it accounts for a third, if not half, of the district. Having spoken to many people, affordable housing is an issue. The rents keep going up, and they've gone up by the hundreds during this pandemic. Over-policing is another issue. In the complexes, we are heavily surveilled. Not too long ago, I came home to find a 12-year-old black student, a former student of mine, and 4 cruisers, and he was standing there without a weapon and not being violent. So a lot of people feel surveilled, like they're being waited to being caught something doing wrong. I did not say that well. Waiting to be caught doing something wrong. Oh, I guess I said it okay. And then the third issue that I hear is we are a food desert over there. There are many people living in poverty, no cars. You have to take 2 buses to get to the supermarket, and then on the PVTA, there's a limit of 3 bags. So if you're a mom of 2 or 3, that means you have to make how many trips to the supermarket? So those are 3 of the issues I wanted to lift up specifically for the apartment complexes in my district. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me remind the candidates that they really need to speak very close to the mic. We'll move on to District 2 and start with Ms. Cano-Martin.
Yes, hi. And I just want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us tonight and having this awesome forum. So I've been doing a lot of door knocking in my district and have talked to people in all different neighborhoods and, you know, echoing many of the same themes we've heard tonight so far. I think the number one issue when I ask people on the doors is the roads. Like, it's just consensus that nobody thinks the roads in Amherst are good. And so I do ask people, we have to think about our budget. We have to think about it holistically, right? If there's things that are important to us, like good roads, education is another big one that comes up. We really do have to look at what we're spending our money on. And so I do have a lot of concerns about our budget. I have concerns about specific projects that are a huge financial commitment for our town. So I would like to see a more balanced budget so that we could address some of these issues that are really important to people, right? And affordable housing is huge. I've seen so many houses get snapped up out of our neighborhood by investors, and I saw these, happy families with babies and baby carriers, hoping to buy a home for their family, and it just went to investors again. So we have to have a strategy on affordable housing, just like everyone up here has said, for families and, for folks who are single as well. Cost of living is huge, as I said. The schools, people are concerned about what's been happening, and we need, new leadership in the schools. And I'm so encouraged that we have some great candidates running for school committee to address those issues. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Griesmer?
Thank you, and welcome. In our district, like many, it's roads and sidewalks, but the difference between District 2 and the districts around the town, the center of town, is we don't have sidewalks. But what we need for the roads is a multi-year plan that we commit to funding so that we can attract the contractors who will actually come and deal with our roads. And we need to stick to that plan once we make it. The second thing is the solar installation on off of Shutesbury Road. And I'm glad to see some of the people here who have been paying enormous attention to that. For those of us that live in the part of District 2 that is on our own sewer, our own septic systems and wells, this is our water source. And what we really need to do is understand the impact of solar and where we should be putting it, like on parking lots and buildings. And then finally, speeding. And one of the things the council has presently started on is a process to really implement some speed limits in various zones within the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. DeAngelis.
Thank you. I'm going to have to say roads and sidewalks right away, or my whole district will be angry with me. And we do need to organize with other communities in terms of finding collaborative ways to schedule road repair and stuff. And what happens is the contractors really get sucked up by the state before they are available to us. The other thing, because our district butts North Amherst and ends at South Amherst. We're the whole eastern side. So we have some of the wealthiest people and some of the poorest people in our district. So in addition to roads and sidewalks, there's real issues about housing. There are issues about food access that Hala touched on a bit. And there's real issues about transportation. And there is a mesh there between roads. Oh my goodness. The other thing is climate and in the environment. We really need to protect our forests and wetlands, and we need to vote for the specialized stretch energy code. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark.
It's hard to follow.
So like many of the candidates up here, I think that affordable housing has been the thing I have heard about at most, if not all of the doors I've been at, whether I'm in the apartment complexes in my district or in my own neighborhood, which is right across the street from UMass. People in my neighborhood are concerned about rising taxes and the ability to age in place, if that's going to be possible for them. We have people that have moved out of our district and out of town because they can't afford to stay here. And in talking with people in some of the apartment complexes I've been in, they've had concerns about the conditions of the apartment. They've had concerns about energy efficiency in their apartments, and they have had concerns about the quality of living in those apartment complexes. And so I think that addressing some of those through a climate lens would be helpful to bring more energy efficient, whether it's heating sources, solar, to the complexes in my district. I think that would be a big priority. Also, I've heard about sidewalks, I've heard about roads. I myself don't like walking on East Pleasant Street. I've also heard from Echo Hill that they would like a bike path that connects to the center of town as well. So I think increasing pedestrian safety and biker safety throughout the district would be important.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question. The request here is, please talk about how you will help Amherst be actively anti-racist. We're going to start with District 1, Mr. O'Connor.
Well,
and please speak directly into the mic. Thank you.
I think we have to start with the schools, where I think we've had problems ever since I moved into the town in the 1970s. We have to continue our work with the police. We have to continue our efforts to hire employees who represent the diversity of the town. And we have to think about where the CRESS program could be best located to serve the community. Thank you. I have no idea how we can go from where we are to where we want to be without having more effective town leadership.
Thank you. Mr. Adie.
Thank you. The question is, how will I help Amherst be more actively anti-racist? I think there are a few things that we could think about, and one is understand what diversity means and understand that diversity is very broad. And that is, diversity involves looking beyond people just as a group, but recognizing that people are individuals. It's very key, because if you don't do that, then you run into a situation where you can have put people in a box. But what we want is to recognize the individuality and humanity of individuals. I think something else we could do is have better training for public officials on some of the issues that different groups are going through. And then finally, I think much more than looking at the town as anti-racist, we as individuals should be able to use our autonomy to help those who are around us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark, will you start us off for District 2?
Una cosa que yo creo que necesitamos hacer es traer traducción a las reuniones como eso. And I apologize for my Spanish, but one of the things I think we need to do is bring translation services to our town government to bring all the voices into the table. I think this is something that, as a member of the Community Safety and Social Justice Committee, our group has been talking about for a while. And we co-sponsored a meeting with the Affordable Housing Trust, the Human Rights Commission, the Board of Health around affordable housing in June, and we were able to work with UMass to bring translation services. So I would really like to see the town prioritize that. I think that we need to go back to the Community Safety Working Group's recommendations that they made and really review how we are doing towards implementing all of those recommendations, not just CRESS and the DEI department, but also where are we on the Youth Empowerment Center? Where are we on changing the policies around policing and the size and scope in town to reduce it so that we are keeping all of our residents safe?
Thank you. Ms. Cano-Martin?
Yes. So I think this is a critical issue for my campaign for sure. And I see this sort of in two parts. The first part would be the DEI lens, right, which brings us the idea of the importance of representation at all levels in our town government, from our town staff to our elected officials to our committees, every town structure. And we do have a DEI office. And I understand that they need more staff in order to do their important work. So I do see the importance of representation. But then the other piece of it is, how do we dismantle institutional racism? Because I think that's what it means to be anti-racist. A lot of great work has been done. I really would applaud the work of the CSWG and the CSSJC. Really happy to see that, that CRESS has been started. I'm really happy to see that the African Heritage Reparations Assembly has a report. We should heed their recommendations, because I think that what they're doing gets at the roots of racism in this town and how it manifests itself. And finally, we should use the racial justice lens. This is a tool that's widely used throughout organizations for any policy or program that we're going to be executing, and I think the town council should be trained on it, and we should use it consistently on everything we do. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Griesmer?
Well, Amherst has made some strides. We have so much further to go on racial justice and diversity. We have, as a council, already voted to create the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We voted to create CRESS, but we need to stand behind those departments and continue to help them to develop and grow. We have also begun the training of our staff, and in fact, very recently pulled together people not only on staff but residents to begin the process of visioning, directed by Dr. Barbara Love. Another recommendation that came out of CSWG and CSSJC. As we progress to releasing the second request for proposals, we need to, in fact, establish a resident oversight board. And we've set aside ARPA funds for our Youth Empowerment Center. We need to get that committee started and come up with a plan for what it really is and what it looks like. And finally, we need to continue to look at other things we have to do. In fact, on Monday the 16th, the Town Council will have a presentation on the AHRA plan and begin the process of discussing how to move forward on its recommendations with the plan, with the fund that we have already established and are working to fund. Thank you.
And Ms. DeAngelis?
You've heard wonderful and important things from 3 people. So I'm going to take a slightly different tack, one that has been a path for me. And we need, if we're going to become anti-racist as individuals or as a community, we need to start with ourselves. We need to learn, in fact, we learn to be racist, to respond to racist ideas by the time we're 8 years old, and it's often taught in silence, or by a glance, a shoulder that's shrugged when you bring a friend home who's a different color. White, black, we all learn what we're supposed to do. So it becomes our job to look at that, to really deeply look at ourselves and begin to understand how to take those things apart, to notice them. Notice them so that we can look at CREST and expand it, so we can support the DEI, so that we can bring food access to people in Amherst who are suffering. This is such a personal issue for me. It needs to be a personal issue for everybody in this room and in our community. Thank you.
And, okay, Ms. Taub?
Thank you. Yes, I think, part of what I was really struck with when we had the incident on July 5th last year was how people, I think, often think that their reality and experience is everybody's. So there were, people who would say, well, I've only had, if I've had any interactions with the police department, they've always been just fine. And so, what are people talking about, and that people, so I think we really need to, as individuals in a community, understand that we can experience things differently and to respect and appreciate and really understand that different people in our community have different experiences so that we can then form policies and programs and respond to the needs and to make life better for everyone in the community. So with that, I fully support the African Heritage Reparation Assembly recommendation that reparations be directed toward youth programming, entrepreneurship, and affordable housing. I think we need to, we are working towards, and we need to seat the Resident Oversight Board and fully fund and resource the CREST program, just for starters.
Thank you. Ms. Lopes?
Thank you. This one, this is difficult. I'm a descendant of those who experienced genocide here and who were enslaved in this area. The last time I was in this building and went to the high school, there are Confederate flags allowed to be parked outside. And I know that leaps and bounds have been made, but we still have a lot of the same nonsense going on today. We have many opportunities to walk our talk, stop talking, stop debating, and start acting. We've had some progressive movements go on. I want to mention and give shout out to the AHRA. Let us be mindful as we talk about housing practices because they call out some of the same ideas we have on the table that are in line with redlining that we've experienced. In 2021, I founded the Ancestral Bridges Foundation to address just this, and we've just had an economic program for youth funded by Greenfield Savings Bank. Another thing I think that we could do, I hope I can get this out, is stop othering people. And really, one thing you do not need to vote someone in to tell you to do is to stop working in the divides that add to systemic racism, which pits and polarizes people of color. I understand a lot of you are new to 2020 and a lot of the acts that have gone on, and I commend this and love this about Amherst. But please understand that when you pivot us people of color together, it hurts us. It really does, and that adds to systemic racism. That was also part of the plan, to divide us so we're not united. Thank you.
And Ms. Rooney?
There have been some incredible things said tonight on this topic. I would like to appreciate the work done by the Community Safety Working Group, the continuation of that work by the Community Safety and Social Justice Committee and the Reparations Program. Acknowledging that one of the steps recommended by the CSWG was to hire a DEI director and get work going. I'm really looking forward to having her review of the Amherst Police Department policies. I think that's a really key element, and also establishing the Resident Oversight Board, two very important elements. Coming up happening recently is a program called Visualizing Equitable Amherst, and I'm reading this here, but it's the visioning process for community racial healing, and that has been initiated by the Community Safety Social Justice Committee, working with Dr. Barbara Love. So this is a program that I hope the entire community gets involved in. Envisioning a socially just and equitable Amherst is a really important thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lord?
Thank you. How do you take 90 seconds to talk about something I could spend hours talking about, and spent my life working on, very focused the past 25 years, training others and working to dismantle racism? I'll lift up 5 things. First is a lived experience of our BIPOC folk in town. Elevate it, amplify it, and believe it. Second is to analyze our institutions' current practices, who is at the table, who is getting paid what, and who is being supported how. 3, don't make it personal unless it is. Structural racism, when we start talking about it, people shut down because they're making it personal. And you know if it's personal and you know if it's don't, so don't take it personally. 4, have these difficult conversations, and can we do it with respect and find ways of healing and non-harm? And then 5, I'm talking so fast, I'm getting through it. Support programs like CREST, the DEI, the Reparations, Land Back, the BIPOC Empowerment Center, the Oversight Board, and can we lead with our hearts and really work to heal and end the structural racism, individual racism, institutional racism, all of it. Thank you.
Mr. Ryan?
We need to lead with our hearts, and we need to listen, and we need to have those difficult conversations. That, I think, says a lot right there. There are a number of excellent suggestions that have been made already this evening. I'm not going to repeat them. I want to just for a moment maybe push the conversation in a slightly different direction. I'm thinking in terms of racial justice and equity, also in terms of the senior community. Adequately funding and supporting the work of the Senior Center, to me, is an issue that involves racial justice and equity. It's also a class issue, and I think the town has really fallen far short of what it should be doing there. I think the decision that the voters made recently to fund a new elementary school at considerable cost to most of us. Our elementary school is now majority non-white, and that strikes me as an important step in the direction of racial healing. I think also what we've been doing in affordable housing, could mention a number of projects. Ball Lane, in particular in North Amherst, will be a home ownership project, 30 units, aimed particularly at people who have been traditionally kept out of the housing market. That's bureaucratic language for people of color. And finally, a project that I'm particularly excited about is the permanent shelter and transitional housing. So I think there are also things we can celebrate
as we also think hard about these conversations that we're going to have.
Thank you. Mr. Drum.
Thank you. Looking at the town, I think we've made some strides. But really looking forward, I do want to engage with what Amber had said with the translation services for the community. Not just in terms of translating and getting the government workings out to the community, but also understanding the various cultures of the diaspora in our community. I moved here a few years ago, but where I lived prior and where my wife worked was in Lawrence. There was a massive minority population in Lawrence, and understanding how those cultures worked greatly helped in bridging some of the communications between the town and the people moving in. I also believe that we should move forward on the youth center, and beyond that, we should look at getting into a universal pre-K program in our town to help further the parental privileges of everyone in town. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to try to squeeze in another question, but I don't think we really have time. So we're going to move on to closing statements, for which you have 60 seconds each. I'm going to start with District 1, and I'm going to start by reading Kathy Shane's statement. So this is a statement in which the I is Kathy Shane. This is a 60-second statement. I seek re-election to shepherd the new elementary school from design to construction and to use my skills as an economist to address our fiscal challenges. I support development that enhances our town, provides affordable housing, protects open spaces and farms, and actions to address climate change. Repairing our roads and sidewalks and being accountable to taxpayers are top priorities. As counselor, I led the elementary school building effort that won over 80% voter support, co-wrote bylaws protecting workers from wage theft, supported our affordable housing zoning bylaw, initiated budget actions to support alternatives to traditional police, protected broad voting access, and served as chair of the elementary school building committee, joint capital planning committee, and vice chair of finance. In District 1, I secured a smart light, lowered Route 63 speed limit, and worked on diverse community concerns, including neighborhoods, farms, and local business. I come prepared to meetings, listen, weigh choices, and act to find solutions. Okay. We will continue with Mr. 80.
Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum, Amherst Cinema for broadcasting it, the candidates here for being helpful in teaching me some of the things that I don't know in this town, and the community for welcoming me here. I came to Amherst about 3 years ago at the peak of the pandemic, and during that time, I've been able to stay here and build a community. And I want to continue to do that through this role with the council, and I intend to do that by collaborating with all the different stakeholders that are necessary to get things done. Thank you.
Mr. O'Connor.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring and organizing this candidates night, and the viewers who are watching. Most District 1 residents know my record of service to the residents of North Amherst, the town, and my views on how to maintain the town's character and its residential neighborhoods. In addition to supporting my candidacy, If you want to bring this community into the 21st century and meet the housing, K-12 education, and other needs of the residents, please vote for and support Alicia Walker and Jamie Daniels for 2 of the 3 councilor-at-large seats. Ms. Daniels and Ms. Walker are both lifelong Amherst residents, smart, independent, professional black women, each with children in our public schools. They love this community and its potential to be better and more inclusive and affordable for all of us. I'm Vince O'Connor, candidate for one of 2 District 1 council seats.
Thank you. Ms. Lord.
Thank you. As a former educator, activist, artist, or current and all these things, and now social worker who works for a climate justice law firm, school, and wellness center in town, I've worked with the community in town for many, many years to make Amherst the best version of itself it can be. When you elect me, I promise to stay heart-centered. I'm committed to serve. I will listen to understand. I will stay solution-focused. I will build relationships. I will hear you. I will sit with you. I will love you. And together we will make Amherst an even better version of itself. Thank you.
Mr. Drum.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone that came out today. As far as what I would like to do, I want to be able to represent everyone in my district, not just the young families, of which I am. I have 2 young children at Crocker Farm. Not just the families that are living check to check in my district, which I am one, and not just everyone that wants to, basically what it is, I want to represent everyone. I want everyone to be able to come knock on my door and let me know what they think. My entire background is working with other parties to compromise on a solution for the majority, and I want to continue that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Mr. Ryan. Right?
Thank you. I represented the old District 3 for 3 years on the council, and I'd like to go back and represent the new District 3. What I learned from my time on the council is that a district councilor, his job basically is twofold. First is to set policy for the town manager, and that's the yearly performance goals that are given to the town manager at the beginning of each year, the most important document, I think, that exists in town. And the second, a district councilor is required to listen and communicate with their residents and to address their concerns and needs. As for the first goal, I was the chair of the committee that helped create and forge that document, the town manager performance goals, and so I'm proud of that. Secondly, all of the years that I have served on council and the subsequent 2 years, I put out a district newsletter. Issue 52 goes out hopefully in a couple weeks. I am busy at the moment, so it may be a challenge, but I work very hard to inform you and to listen, and that's what I promise to do if you elect me.
Thank you. Ms. DeAngelis.
Thank you. We are all very different people with one thing in common: change. We are confronted on a daily basis by views other than our own, and the need to be flexible and adaptable, to hold true to what we value, yet simultaneously listen, learn, and sometimes compromise. Change challenges us to act. When District 2 residents were concerned about the impact of clear-cutting trees for a large-scale solar installation, I acted and pushed policy that led to the Solar Bylaw Working Group. When residents off East Pleasant Street were concerned by student behavior in the neighborhood, I got to work organizing meetings between all the parties. And those meetings generated change. And when I saw opponents fighting to stop an affordable housing development that would help our most vulnerable residents, I got to work and fought for the project. And I was so proud to be at the opening of the East Gables in September with many of the men and women at this group. I don't just show up and vote, and I put in the work, and I'm willing to fight. And I want to continue working and fighting for Amherst. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark?
That was Clark.
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure. So I am a graduate of Amherst High School. I'm a mother of a public school student here, and I am on both the Affordable Housing Trust and the Community Safety and Social Justice Committee. So I feel very deeply that this town is my home, and I want to work to make it a better version of itself. And I think that that involves listening to people whose voices haven't been at the table. And I have a skill set from my background as a social worker that would help me deeply listen and engage with people who haven't always engaged with the town. I'm just going to stop there because 15 seconds is too much.
Thank you. Ms. Cano Martin.
Yes. So I am a mother of 2 children who are here in the audience tonight, so happy to have them, yes. And I'm also a working mom. I've worked as a union organizer for about 20 years, and that job entails working with, for me, low-income people who are often marginalized by different identities that they have, and bringing those people together to feel their own power and to make a change in their circumstances for the better. It involves talking to people, it involves getting people involved, it involves not being afraid to have a conversation at the door, on the phone, by text, anywhere. And that's the skill set that I bring. I am bilingual, I speak Spanish, my home is bicultural and biracial, and I think that's an important experience to have on the council as well. So I thank you, and I ask for your vote.
Ms. Griesmer.
I'm proud to have represented District 2 for the last 2 terms, but I want to continue working to build a new DPW and a fire and EMS station, which is why I testified on the act creating a municipal and public safety building authority just last week. I want to pass our first solar energy bylaw. I want to renovate our senior center and repair our roads and sidewalks. At the same time, we need to continue to forge a safer and just community through Police Oversight Board and the funding of CRESS. But in order to create a more balance in our community with regard to who lives here and who pays, we need to pursue more robust strategic agreements with our higher ed institutions and work with the legislature to pass pilot legislation that will account not just for the land, but for what's built on it and who comes to it. Erosion of public confidence in government is rampant.
Thank you. District 4, Ms. Lopes.
In 2021, you elected me to represent all of you. My great aunts and uncles and grandparents worked as the help generationally serving and cleaning up after privileged UMass and Amherst College students and faculty. My indigenous ancestors served meals to Amherst College presidents and their esteemed company on plates depicting Lord Jeffrey Amherst massacring Indians. They washed these plates and served and washed and served. I am serving too proudly. I am the first indigenous person to serve on this governing body of the town since before 1710 when all of the council were indigenous. My ancestors, thank you for your votes. This town is big enough for everyone. Our future can be brighter than our past. I am dedicated to ensuring your voices are heard and the betterment of our community is forefront. I joined the council without any agendas to stop or start anything. I came to represent you. While some people's first reaction is no, mine is yes. How? Let's cooperate, let's work together to assure that our decisions make our towns stronger and safer and that community is enhanced and culture is celebrated. My way is to calmly and rationally talk things out. I don't prejudge,
Yeah,
assume
time,
others.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Ms. Taub.
Sorry for the overtime.
Amherst is a special place, home to 2 colleges and a university, a rich multicultural history, open space, and close-knit neighborhoods many have called home for decades and generations. On the council, I've been a fierce advocate for promoting a sustainable balance between our year-round and student residents to reverse the trend of a declining non-student population. Our town's changing demographic is an important lens through which council policy should be evaluated. We should ask if decisions help to sustain our year-round population or community or work against it. Repairing streets and sidewalks is a top priority. If reelected, I will support forming a consortium with other towns to better position Amherst to compete with larger state contracts for road paving services. As your counselor, I take my constituent services seriously. Whether a parking matter or a broken street light, I get into the nitty-gritty of helping resolve constituent issues. My ultimate goal is to keep Amherst a place where people want to live and can afford to. Let's strike the best balance between College Town and the Amherst that to all of us is home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Rooney?
I'm Pam Rooney, and I'm an unrelenting advocate for District 4. More than anything, I value the strong neighborhoods in District 4 and the unique issues that we face because of proximity to both the downtown and to the university. My most significant contribution to the council and the town has always been in the realm of zoning and bylaw review. I am the only candidate who's ever been on the planning board, so I understand what zoning changes mean on the ground. District 4 is dense and comprised of so many different types of housing. Increasing this density and composition is possible if done with care. Abutters still need to be notified to improve proposals and point out negative impacts. I want more properties available to our workforce, not to those investors that have been mentioned here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of the candidates. So I remind you, you will get to vote for 2 candidates in your district. We're asking now the candidates for the at-large seats to please come up.
Yeah, everybody else is going to go, and then I will dislodge myself, and then hopefully we can safely and securely on.
A little bit, you know, just don't fill it all the way though.
I don't
Thank you.
separate pages. Oh, do you need that? I do. Mine are, I literally, 3 pages though? Well, I literally just bought a pack of pens because I also have pens.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I think I actually looked at
pages. It looks like you did.
Yeah. So basically all my comments will be as though I didn't hear any of the past hour. Okay. We were just joking. It's nice to we have our own night.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. We now are turning to the candidates for the 3 at-large seats. We have 5 candidates on the ballot. You will get to vote for 3 in the November election. Again, thank you all for coming. The candidates are here. Mandy Johanneke, let's see what we have here. Jamie Daniels, Andrew Stein, Alicia Walker, and Matthew Holloway, right? Okay. and you will have 90 seconds to answer each question. And as before, we have tried to randomize the order a bit. So the first question is, how will you address the issues of Latinx residents, and what do you think those issues are? Maybe in the reverse order. Alicia, would you start us off?
Thank you. Thank you so much for hosting this event. So in addressing issues for Latinx residents, the first and foremost is going to be translation services. We do have a very large population of people in this town who do not speak English as their first language, and there are a lot of Latinx families who do not speak English as their first language. And so for them to be able to engage with the town and for us to understand their needs at all, we first need to be able to communicate with them. So that would be first. And the second thing would be engaging with them directly. And so part of my calls for wanting to be on the council is to increase community engagement, because I truly believe that to make resolutions for any specific community, those people need to be involved in the decision-making process. And so I wouldn't be comfortable making decisions for any Latinx community myself without their input. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steinberg.
Yes, I too, I'll start where Alicia left off, and that is that we need to start by talking to the community that we're concerned about to make sure that we understand the issues and don't make assumptions about what those issues are. So I would first reach out to the Latinx community. Secondly, I recognize language is a barrier for some, not probably for all, but certainly for some, and we need to make sure that in all of our programs, whether they be town council meetings or they be other kinds of meetings, they be our schools, they be our libraries, that we need to make sure that every service meets the needs. The last thing I'll mention, as I'm going to run out of time, is that I think we should make sure that we address and they're sensitive to the problems of seniors in the Latinx community to make sure that we are meeting their needs.
Thank you. Ms. Haneke.
Thank you. Yes. In addition to the translation services and the outreach that has already been mentioned that would be necessary for any community that has individuals that do not have a native language of English, we need to look at our housing laws and housing services, our transportation services, and our youth services in particular. But many of the things that we need to look at are what we need to look at for all of our residents in our community. But the one thing I want to mention is one thing that applies that I've done in the past that would affect low-income workers in particular, no matter their identity, is the wage theft laws that Councillor DeAngelis and I brought to the council and passed to ensure that all residents in Amherst have an area and a knowledge of where they can go when, unfortunately, employers sometimes don't pay them when they should be paying them. And we worked with a lot of local unions and workers' rights centers to make that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Holiday, sorry.
Holloway, thank you. Yeah, good evening. Thanks so much to the League for hosting me tonight, for hosting this debate. I guess I would start by just sort of speaking to the elephant in the room, which is that I am, a white male, and I recognize that comes with a set of privileges that need to be examined and explored, and we need to be aware of those things. I've spent my entire career in education, public education. I'm a director of student services and in a relatively small district in Massachusetts, and that means I'm also the English learner program director, which means that I'm coordinating services for kids who are, second language speakers. And in addition to translation services, in addition to giving students affinity groups that they can belong to and be a member of, I also have had the privilege of starting English learner parent advisory councils, which are a really innovative piece of state legislation that came out in 2017 called the Look Act, and it was a requirement of districts that had a certain percentage or a certain number of students who were non-native English speakers. So that experience really, I think, was very transformative for me, just to engage with those communities and really to turn over autonomy to them in terms of running the group. And I think that's a big part of being a white male in government, is to know how to defer and yield decision-making power to other groups. So that's one important experience that would shape my approach to the work, and as others have said, and community engagement is the core.
Thank you. Ms. Daniels.
Thank you. Thanks so much to the League of Women Voters. It's amazing to be on this stage. The last time I was here, I was singing in the middle school choir. I will try to be very quick. I am a woman of color, and I am an expert on race and inclusion. My work in research and training has all been grounded in an anti-racism framework, and I participated and led institutions in our work, sort of focusing on bringing our anti-racist values into practice, like how do we bring them alive. Reaching communities of color, Black and Latino communities, is very personal for me. It's something I'm deeply committed to. If elected, I will work to apply an anti-racist framework to all aspects of governance. This really includes thinking about the impact that policies have on Black and Latinx communities, right? Housing policies, budgetary decisions, infrastructure issues. I think that I'm very invested in civic engagement, and so if I'm elected, I will be going into, and already have been going into, and talking to communities of color and the Latinx community here in Amherst, and those who are closest to the problem have to be part of the solution. So I'm committed to increasing civic engagement and the other things that the folks on stage have mentioned.
Thank you. The next question is, what specific priorities will you support to expand housing for working people, students, and people on fixed incomes? Mr. Steinberg, could you start us on that?
Yes. Housing certainly is an issue in Amherst because affordability of housing, not just here but statewide and nationally, has become an increasing problem. But we can't evade the fact that we share that problem and have to take care of it to the extent that we can ourselves. The need, therefore, is to think about what is it that we can do, what is the amount that we can really solve up a nationwide problem, and to find creative solutions. I think we've been very successful in the affordable housing realm with the Northampton Road, East Gable community, the plans that we have for moving forward. We saved Rolling Ridge, for that matter, for affordable housing. So there's numbers of things that we have accomplished and that we have to accomplish ahead. We need to be looking at what we can do to make housing easier to build, to come to zoning provisions that will allow us to increase the density or the number of housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Daniels.
So I think that affordable housing isn't just a basic need, it's really the cornerstone of any vibrant community. Affordable housing is personal to me. I'm a renter here in Amherst, and my rent is $1,000 per bedroom. I'm a small business owner, and I've been shut out of the housing market. My mother, who lived here much of her life, had to leave Amherst to afford a home and to buy a home. I think it's important that we do recognize that this is a national crisis, and that it's layered really with complexity. I do think that local officials need to be lobbying state and federal representatives, and if I'm elected, I will do that work of lobbying our local, state and national officials. I think the housing crisis is compounded locally. Enrollment has outgrown UMass's capacity to house students, and we've been converting many single-family homes into rental units, and we've been focusing on building high-end, expensive housing. I think that we need to ask UMass to build more dorms on campus. I'm going to really work to strengthen our inclusionary zoning laws here in Amherst. We need to meet the needs of a range of housing needs, so building different kinds of affordable housing units here.
Thank you. Ms. Haneke.
Thank you. I'm going to start with what I've already tried to do as a counselor on housing in general and specific housing. I was a co-sponsor with Councilor Devlin Gauthier of legislation at the state level, special legislation for Amherst to increase revenue for affordable housing and attainable housing through imposing transfer fees on certain transfers in town, including on non-owner occupied housing and high-end, high-value housing. That special legislation goes to hearing next week, where I will be testifying in front of the committee. I also proposed with Councilor DeAngelis legislation for zoning revisions that were designed to provide more pathways to home ownership and increase the diversity of housing types in our town. That legislation was not successful, but led directly to planning board conversations on changes to zoning laws that we can look at. I also support looking at, certainly our zoning changes have to happen, but what things could we do? We could look at student housing districts and collaborating and partnering with the university for student or employee housing in appropriate locations in town, providing more pathways to home ownership, zoning changes to expand our village center housing options, and guiding new housing growth to those areas, as well as increasing the diversity of housing types in town.
Thank you. Mr. Holliday.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess I wanted to say two things about housing in Amherst. First of all, I think as has been said, there are really exciting steps being made towards affordable housing in town, and I don't want to lose sight of that. I think we need to celebrate that. A lot of folks have worked really, really hard in this town to make that happen. And when I talk to the residents in District 1 about this Ball Lane project, I think what is most noticeable for me is the sense of pride and excitement that they feel about that housing project. It's a path towards homeownership for first-time homeowners, and I think that's something that, it's a deep core value that Amherst certainly has. The other thing I want to talk about is zoning, and the complexities of zoning, and I think we, as a public servant, municipal employee myself, I would be very committed to working closely with our planning department in projects such as zoning, and really sort of supporting our staff in bringing a vision forward on that topic in particular. I think flexible zoning techniques like form-based zoning codes, promoting mixed-use development, and densifying the village centers, and doing that sort of work is really vital to this. And I also think that a spirit of enterprise and entrepreneurship needs to take over some of this housing work as well, because we do have a significant lack of affordable, attainable housing, as my friend George says, lowercase affordable housing. And I think sometimes we need to have creative solutions such as zoning waivers, deed restrictions, and other kind of agreements with developers to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Walker.
Thank you. So for my priorities for addressing specifically student housing, I think the number one way to do that is to require UMass to house more of their students. UMass has tons of development happening all the time, and some of that development can be student housing. When it comes to housing for other individuals across the town, I think what we need to do is redefine what affordable actually is, because we're continuing to build affordable housing units, but when we look at what the rates are for those units, they're still fairly high and unattainable to single-parent households, to people who are on fixed incomes. And so I think that would be the first step there. We also need to look at building more specifically subsidized and income-based housing so that people who are on fixed incomes can still afford their rent and are not paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And whether it be through the town providing more funding on its own for initiatives, but we need to look for ways to combat our increasing housing taxes for homeowners and for renters, because we know that those increases are passed down to renters. And so whether that be, again, the town taking on more of the costs for projects or providing families with housing assistance. We can have housing assistance, more funding directly to families to pay their bills. And another thing is that mobility in housing is extremely limited, and so we need to look at having opportunities for home ownership for people who have low income and are on fixed incomes as well.
Thank you. Okay, this next question might be a yes/no question, but you may speak longer if you wish. Would you move to implement ranked choice voting as a bylaw instead of waiting for the state to approve the measure? We'll start with Ms. Daniels, please.
Yes, I would.
Okay. Mr. Holloway.
I'm trying to think of a non-yes/no answer to that question.
It's all right.
I mean, I have studied it somewhat, and I am in principle in support of it. I am reluctant, though, to get out ahead of the state on voting procedures, so I guess my answer would be a cautious no.
Thank you. Mr. Steinberg.
Well, I'm going to start by saying that if it were possible for us to do it on our own without state approval, I certainly would be supportive, because we had a charter commission and a charter adopted by our residents that put high value on ranked choice voting. And it's been one of the distressing things that we have been trying for the entire duration of having a council to get ranked choice voting actually allowed by the legislature. So we get into the question as to whether there is a path for doing it other than with legislative authorization through special legislation, which is what has happened in East Hampton and other communities that have adopted ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting will have its challenges. We have set it up as much as we can by obtaining the voting equipment so that we're ready to go on the voting equipment side. We do need to think about, when we get to ranked choice voting, of how to inform our voters as to how the system works so they can understand the very different kind of ballot. But I think the principle is one the community supported, and we should go forward.
Thank you. Ms. Walker.
Thank you. I agree that if we are allowed to do so, that we should look to do that. We know that things at the state level don't always move as quickly as we would like them to, and some of these things would definitely benefit our community. For example, with the council, how we have our setup and 13 counselors, and you're able to choose 2 for your district and 3 for at large, I think rank choice voting would be a game changer and would let residents more adequately express how they feel and how they want to be represented.
Thank you. Ms. Haneke.
This takes me back. So I was one of the charter commissioners that truly supported putting ranked choice voting into the charter. And I still believe that the way we did it allowed for us to adopt a bylaw. Unfortunately, our town attorney said no. So I think we can do it through the bylaw. It went through the AG, but even without being able to do it through the bylaw, or if that runs into some opposition from the state level, the other thing I would encourage to do is we're going to be doing a charter review in 2024, and I will be out there asking our charter review committee to recommend putting ranked choice voting into our elections provision of the charter instead of the transitions provision, to see if we can get it in that way too. I've also been testifying at the State House every year, every time this bill comes up, to get ranked choice voting into our elections in Amherst.
Thank you. That's a very nice lead-in into the next question, which is, in 2024, the charter will be up for review. What changes should we consider in the current council town manager form of government? Mr. Holloway, would you start, please?
Thank you. I'm going to answer that question based on process as opposed to a bullet list of changes, because I think one thing that we've seen in this town for the past several years is a growing divide, and many folks in the previous session spoke to this, and folks on this stage have spoken to this. really adequately as well. And I think it's important to figure out what process, what piece of our near future might be a healing time for us. And I genuinely think that this charter review time can be a time to do some healing for us as a town community, as a political body. You know, I think we can talk a good game and we can, you know, promote good attitudes, but something that has an actual outcome to it, such as the charter review, I think is really maybe the best opportunity we have as a community to do some of that healing and unifying. And I'll take this opportunity also to mention that, you know, the new school vote, of course, which won 82% of the vote, I think is another example of something that is starting to heal the divide for Amherst. And I do think that, you know, this town, although I was not living in Amherst when we had the charter vote, you know, I think this town has kind of gotten off track in terms of having a unified civic approach. It's my hope that the school vote is a major piece of that. I think this is a project that we saw near unanimous support amongst the community, and my hope is that the Charter Review Commission can be another unifying body. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Walker.
Thank you. So when we're looking to the charter review in 2024, I think the most important thing is to be focusing on the process and how we approach the review itself. And so it's essential to prioritize community engagement and representation, making sure we're reaching all of our marginalized community members as well. And so this would include ensuring that their perspectives are integrated through wide community outreach. So we would have to have lots of different channels for input. We would have to go into the community, and I also believe that this will require a great deal of education, because there's a lot of people in our community who don't know what the charter says. I think that's more common than not. And so to ask people to give us input on something that they are not knowledgeable about in the first place is really difficult. And so I think that first step is educating the community with workshops or events where we can go out into the community and let them know this is what we need your input on. And I'm hoping that then that will be reflected in the changes that are made to the charter. And I think we need to look at our policies and procedures in general to figure out how they can be more inclusive of all community members. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steinberg.
Yes, thank you. I think the first thing we need to recognize is that there are limitations on what we can do in charter review without having an actual charter commission that's going to be would look at the entire charter, as was done with the original charter. Charter review cannot do things like change from a town manager to a mayor, or change the size of the council, or change the terms of elections. Those things are prohibited by state law. So we need to look at what it is in the charter that we can change, and there are a couple things that I think about as we talk. One is, as was pointed out, we need to be hearing from our community about what it is that they would like. I don't think that they need to know the charter. I think what we need to hear from them is where they're happy with the government and where they're not happy with the government, and that will inform us. The last thing that I want to talk about quickly is budget. I think that there are things we can do in the budget process that can be done through the charter, including providing more time for the council to provide input to the manager in the development of the budget, and more time to review the budget after it's submitted.
Thank you. Ms. Haneke?
I agree that the process is going to be very important, and that we need to have a committee that looks holistically at the charter, but ensures that they're looking at the parts that could be modified, because as Andy said, there's some things that cannot be modified through this process. You know, in 5 years of operating under this charter, we've seen, as counselors, for some of us who are counselors, and as community members, we've seen some things work well and some things not work well. I hope the Charter Review Committee will really look and survey a whole wide swath of the town to see, and not just the residents, but also some some committee members that have been operating under this charter and town staff that have been operating under it, like Andy said, with the budget, and the council with things like forums, to see where we can improve it. The charter, in particular with forums, said something, on how to hold the forums, and I 100% agree these are necessary. The yearly forums on budget and master plan and the schools, I'm not sure the school committee has been holding their forums, and the budget and master plan forums I think could be working a lot better, but it's up for the charter review committee to figure out how to make that happen, not for us to tell them what they need to do.
Ms. Daniels, and please speak directly into the mic.
Sure. I think that the council, this is a very new system, and
Could you get closer to the mic?
closer. Oh, thanks.
You can pull it towards you.
Sure. How's that? Yeah. So I think this is a very new system, and the council's still figuring out some things, like they're figuring out what their role is and what their relationship is to the town manager. I would agree that I think that there's limits in terms of what we can do with the charter, but and that we need to focus on process. The hallmark of my campaign has been a listening tour, and I think that as we move forward into the review of the charter, it's going to be really important to center the voices of the people in our community. I've been watching many hours and hours of town council meetings, and myself thinking about what is working and what isn't working and what is possible in terms of changes. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. The next question is, do you support the proposal to switch to a town contract with a waste hauler that would include a pay-as-you-throw fee structure and townwide curbside compost pickup? Why or why not? Ms. Haneke, could you start?
The devil is in the details with any type of bylaw proposal. So I absolutely support mandating composting in this town. It's one of the main things we need to be doing to ensure we're meeting our climate action goals and reducing waste. I support all sorts of other waste reduction measures. Whether that needs to come with a town-wide contract or whether it can come through other methods, I don't know what the best solution is. I've been anxiously awaiting the Town Services and Outreach Committee's thoughts on the matter, but also the request for information that has been set out to see what is going on there. There are many different options we can choose. When I lived in Boulder, it was through I think the Board of Health, but there was no town-wide contract, but composting was mandated when I lived in Boulder and we were mandated to also have pay-as-you-throw rates, so it can be done without contracts and it can be done cheaper without contracts, town-wide contracts, yet the town over, Louisville, Colorado, had a town-wide contract that also mandated curbside composting and pay-as-you-throw systems and all. So there's different ways to do it, but those options are there, and we do need to do something about reducing our waste and ensuring that composting is mandated in town.
Thank you. Mr. Holloway.
Thank you. I agree wholeheartedly with Mandy Jo. There is a lot of potential in the bylaw. There's a lot of work yet to be done on it. I think the costs need to be studied really closely on this matter. But I do also agree that composting is essential, and that food waste is a major problem for humanity today. So I don't dismiss the importance of the question or of the topic. But I do look forward to seeing the fiscal impact of the bylaw. It reminds me of another major thing that I've heard from many residents up and down Amherst. When you run at large, you get to meet a lot of folks in a lot of different neighborhoods. And one consistent theme that I've run into is this notion that we need to be planting pollinators on our public grounds. And I mentioned that to a few members of town staff in passing, and they said, "Sure, we can do that." And I think as a counselor, there is room to sort of engage with the public, with each other, and with town staff to make big and small improvements on the town. But I do want to kind of make one point, which is that some of these improvements are important, and many of these things can be legislated through bylaws and through regulation. But I think that the council does need to stay focused on some of the major projects that are a major concern to our residents, and that includes, raising revenue, easing the tax burden, addressing the 4 building projects, addressing the roads. We have really core municipal work that needs to be done, and so our time is not is finite.
Thank you,
as is the
Mr.
time
Holloway.
of town staff.
Ms. Daniels.
I think that climate change is the most pressing issue of our time, and that addressing climate change is really an imperative. If elected, will champion efforts to combat climate change. I would support a waste hauler bylaw. I certainly would want to look carefully at it, but I think that that town-wide composting is essential, and that we need to push for all sorts of greener solutions.
Thank you. Mr. Steinberg.
Yes, this is one that I could go on for an hour about, but I only have a few seconds. I'm one of the co-sponsors of the bylaw, and when I was on the select board, I was the liaison to the Recycling and Refuse Management Committee that developed the goals that are now being talked about. So I've really been at this for quite a number of years. It is a complex issue, but it is an important issue, because if we don't do this, what's happening is we are forced to haul a large amount of trash away from the community. There's huge environmental costs to doing that because there is no landfill here anymore, and there is no landfill nearby. And if we don't do composting, then burying the compost creates methane. So there are great benefits, but there are huge challenges, and I don't have time to go into the challenges now, but I assure you that the committee is working on it, and encourage you to look at the Town Services and Outreach Committee packets for information that is available that will inform you about the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question. There are residents who feel that their issues are not...
Excuse me? Sorry, I didn't
Did
get
I
to
miss
answer
somebody?
the question.
I'm sorry, Ms. Walker, please.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
No problem. So I am also one of the original co-sponsors of the waste hauler bylaw, and so as a counselor, I would absolutely continue to advocate to see this to implementation. I mean, it is no surprise to anyone that we are in an urgent climate crisis. And so I think that it's really important that we're looking as a town, all of the things that we can do collectively to be reducing our waste and to be working towards the goals that are outlined for us in our CARP report. But we also know that the climate crisis will, in order to work towards reducing the speed of how fast it's happening, it's going to take all of us. And so this is a really important bylaw because it allows the community to take some responsibility individually, and it is something that we're encouraging at the town level and supporting at the town level. And so I think it's really important that we're going to be looking at waste reduction. We'll have the pay-as-you-go fee structure that will help incentivize that for residents, and universal composting as well, so that that is an option for all residents. And so I think this is one way that we can build relationship with town residents through educating them on this system and how they can work with us towards making an impact on our climate goals. And so, yes, as a counselor, I will absolutely support this, and I look forward to continuing to see it through to implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, the next question. There are residents who feel that their issues are not being seriously listened to and addressed. Are you willing to find a way for constituents to be heard during council meetings? Ms. Haneke, could you start with that, please?
We have a very diverse town that comes with a lot of diverse opinions, and as council, we've done our best to try and balance all of the different opinions that we hear. So, and as a charter commissioner, I worked really hard to make sure that we would have opportunities for our residents to be heard by not just the council, but by the school committee and all. I mentioned a little bit about the public forums and all. We mandated public comment at every regular meeting of not just the council, but the school committee, the library trustees, and all town committees, in order to make sure that residents' voices and issues and concerns could be heard. It's not always possible, though, for the council to act on a concern because we have limited authority to do so. We're a legislative body, we're not the executive. So we can do our best to hear what people want to say and bring in that public comment and use the forums and the other matters and ways to hear that we've done and the council, but we have to recognize that we can only do some things, and when we can't do something, we need to take it to the right people who can do stuff.
Thank you. Mr. Steinberg?
Yes, the goal of hearing from the community and making sure that the community can be heard at every meeting is extremely important. Generally, the public comment is at the beginning of meetings. I have heard the discussion about trying to experiment with having some public comment during the meetings. We have done that on a few occasions on very specialized issues. The balance that we're trying to strike is having enough time to work with a rather large 13-person council and get the work done, and at the same time assure that there's enough opportunity to hear from the community and have the community engaging in the discussion. The one thing that I would add to what we currently have is that in addition to providing written comments that are provided to the council, I think it's time to look at other electronic means, like allowing people in some fashion to provide a recorded or visually recorded public comment that would become available as public comment in the same way.
Thank you. Ms. Daniels?
So I think that our public discourse is really rooted in distrust, and that we need to work on rebuilding trust and making sure that people feel heard and seen and valued. I will support public comment, and I do agree that our meetings go on for quite a long time. I think that there are other things that we can do to bring people into the conversation and make people feel heard in our community. If elected, I will certainly work to build trusting relationships with members, doing lots of outreach. I will work to establish open lines of communication with community members. I think that we can get really creative about this, whether it be holding office hours, going into community, using social media. We really have to go where the people are and get to know each other, our neighbors, and be in conversation. And again, the hallmark of my campaign has been a listening tour. Part of this commitment is because I know that how important it is for people to feel heard and represented. I will find other creative ways to dismantle information to people in our community. I think when they have the information and they feel like they're part of the solution, it will help with the issue of public comments going on too long. But again, I will support public comment.
Thank you. Ms. Walker.
Thank you. As I've been talking to people in the community, this is a concern that I've heard very often. And one of the reasons why I think this is happening is that even when people public comment, they don't get a response. And that is our typical format now. We listen, but we don't say anything. And so how can we really, truly make people feel like they were heard when we're essentially ignoring what they just said and continuing on with our meeting? And so what I think as elected officials our top priority should be is to figure out how to establish a two-way dialogue so that we can get feedback from our community and we can give them feedback on their questions. And this can ensure that they adequately are comprehending the implications of whatever suggestion we have on the board, whether it be a policy, a bylaw, or what have you, and so that they can also actively participate in shaping our decisions. And it's really hard when we're not giving them feedback to their questions or concerns that they're presenting to us in the meetings. This commitment would include dedicating sufficient funding to supporting our identified priorities, and we should work diligently to enhance public engagement by removing the obstacles to participation, and whether that, again, be language services or the times that we're holding our meetings. I think it's really important for us to start to look at why aren't people able to engage with us, and how can we make those changes to our policies or just our practices so that people are able to communicate with us and we are able to communicate back. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Holloway.
Thank you. I guess I'll just expand and echo the previous comments, because I think that public comment, I'm pretty familiar with the open meeting law and the procedures of public comment, but I think that it's a marker for something deeper and more substantial, and a craving for, yes, dialogue, conversation, but also trust, a trust that the people who are in elected positions are actually upholding the values and the desires of everybody in the community. And one thing I think, just, I have not, this is my first campaign for a town office in Amherst, but I think folks in this room right now can speak to the fact that I will work tirelessly to make connections with folks who may or may not actually wind up agreeing with me. And one thing that I've done throughout my career, both professionally and volunteer, is I've worked in consensus-based groups, under strict structures. And I think that what's important with that kind of process is that you don't walk away from each other. You don't walk away feeling as though, one side might win, one side might lose, but there is still a process of working out the details and the resolution. And I think I have a skill at that, and a patience for that, and a temperament for that. And I just want one final point is that, when things are at the level of public comment in public meetings, oftentimes, the level of stress and anxiety gets high, and I think we see that on our counselors. I do. I've gotten to know everybody on the council, and I think it is a stressful position, but also on our town staff. So I think working to address some of these issues will help to address some of that as well.
Thank you. This is a two-part question. A central responsibility of the town council is budget approval. So first, what familiarity and understanding of municipal finance and fiscal issues do you have? And second, if elected, would you be prepared to serve as one of the 5 town councilors on the finance committee? Ms. Walker, would you like to start, please?
Thank you. So yes, I'll answer the second question first. I am currently a member of the town's finance committee and have been for the last 2 years. And if I am reelected, it is a committee that I would continue to seek to serve on. And part of the reason is because I believe that the most important thing we can do in achieving whatever our priorities are is to apply funding to those priorities. And so while I would commit to serving on the finance committee again, and I think it's an incredibly important part of everything that we do, it might be the most essential thing, I believe that we need to look at how our budget process works and how we're allowing the needs in our community to be informing where our money goes. And so as a town councilor, I would seek to gather information from the community to continue to educate the community about the budget process and to engage in authentic discussion with community members about balancing our budget priorities. By creating opportunities for inclusion and inquiry-based solutions to new and old issues in our town, I think this is how we will honestly come to understand each other more, and how we can start to bridge the gap between some of the community members in our town, because people like to feel that you are prioritizing them and their needs. And again, one of the #1 ways you can do so is to apply funding to initiatives that are important to people in our community.
Thank you. Ms. Daniels.
I want to begin by saying that I really do think that the federal government has abandoned its caretaking responsibilities, and that municipalities are really overwhelmed by this reality. I understand that with respect to a budget, there's always fixed costs. I've been living on a fixed income my whole life, and I certainly know how to keep the lights on. But what we do with the rest of our money has to do with our values and how we prioritize spending. I think that we have, the way that we manage our budget really reflects how we put our values into practice. I know we're a municipality and we can't do it alone. I think that we do need to be lobbying the state. We need to work to strengthen our strategic partnerships with the University of Massachusetts and Amherst College, and also neighboring towns. Like, how can we partner with them around things that we need and that they need that we could do together? As a counselor, I would really be on a hunt for dollars, like trying to find federal grants, state grants. I think I'm highly qualified, both because of my lived experience and my professional experience. I've served on countless boards and committees for many, many years, providing oversight, organizational oversight and budgetary oversight. So I certainly think I've got the chops for looking at and managing a budget.
Thank you. Ms. Haneke.
I'll, like Alicia, start with the second question, which is, while I haven't served on Finance Committee at all in my 5 years, it's not because of not trying. I think it's a committee that many counselors want to serve on, and only 5 get to serve on it. And so I will continue to request to be appointed to that committee, and depending on who the president of a new council is, if reelected, we'll see whether I get on it or not. What I have had a privilege of serving on in the last 5 years is our budget coordinating group and the Joint Capital Planning Committee. The Joint Capital Planning Committee is the committee that deals with looking at the capital spending for the year, not the big projects, but the small stuff. Are we going to repair certain problems and small problems in buildings? Are we going to replace some HVAC systems that we need? Are we going to buy fire engines or ladder trucks or other vehicles for police, for CRESS, for our conservation department, for our DPW, snowplows and all, and what are we going to do with that? So the one thing I've learned in the last 5 years as a counselor is that the budget guidelines the council puts out in December and January are some of the most important documents that we have, because that's what the manager takes to form his budget to come back to us in May. And so we need to look really closely at those guidelines and determine what we want in them to guide the manager in how he's going to build his budget.
Thank you. Mr. Steinberg?
Well, I am the chair of the Finance Committee. I have been chair since the council came into action. I was a member of the former Finance Committee that was a body of town meeting, and at one point was chair of that. I've been on the select board. I've been dealing with town budgets for a long time. I'm also a member of the Massachusetts Municipal Association Fiscal Policy Committee as one of 3 counselors from the entire state that are appointed to serve on that committee. It's a committee of about 20 people that recommends the financial lobbying strategy and goals for the organization of all cities and towns. So I am extremely well grounded in budget and budget process. As the chair of the Finance Committee at its beginning, in the very first year, I was the one who created the idea of the guidelines, which have been extremely successful. We faced some big challenges, and if I don't get a chance to talk more, because I see my time is about up, I am going to return to this probably in my closing argument, because I think it is one of what I think most critical issues that we're facing is how to have enough budget to do all we want to do and to recognize we can't.
Thank you. Mr. Holloway.
Did anybody else feel empathy when they heard that Andy only had 90 seconds to talk about the Finance Committee? I will take the question one step further and say that if I lose this election, I still commit to serving on the Finance Committee. I've been serving as a resident non-voting member of the Finance Committee for about 2.5 years. It's one of the interesting things in the charter, which establishes 3 resident seats, which it's a non-voting seat, but we are treated like equal members of the conversation. And I think to some of the points about community engagement and fostering an open dialogue, I think those seats are important places for community members to be involved and to learn about the government process. And I think I've learned and lived through the budget cycle a few times, and you realize that it does follow the calendar. And there's 2 really key points in that process. One is the issuance of budget guidelines, of course, and then the other is the final approval of the budget. But I think the thing that sort of stuck in my head most was the comment that our town manager made this past time around, who, he said, we reviewed their budget in great detail and did not make a lot of changes or a lot of, didn't raise a lot of flags. And what he said was, the depth and thickness of this report that you're putting out builds public trust. And so it's not so much the decision-making and new priorities and big ideas that comes out of that process, but public trust. And I think I take that very seriously. I think it's very important. And my final point I'll just say is that, we have lost a really creative finance director recently. This is a major blow to our town, and if folks are not aware of that, it really is something to be dealt with.
Okay, we need to move on to your closing statements. These are 1 minute, 60-second statements. Let's begin with Ms. Daniels, please.
Thank you. I am a lifelong Amherst resident, and living here my entire life has given me much insight into our town. My plan for council is really simple. It is to prioritize sustainable economic development, to budget in a way that reflects our values, to help heal the divisions within our community, to prioritize racial justice and economic justice, to apply a racial and economic justice lens to all aspects of governance, and to ensure accountability and transparency in our government. I will work tirelessly on your behalf. I'm a fantastic listener, and I'm committed to bringing more people into the conversation and into the political process. I hope that you'll vote for me on November 7th, and I hope to have the opportunity to serve all of you.
Thank you. Mr. Holloway?
Thank you. I'm here to ask you for your vote for one of the 3 seats for Councilor at Large. I bring a sense of creativity, enterprise, and optimism to public service and to government work. I am experienced with the municipal budget and the budgeting process, both as a public employee and also as a volunteer. I am a fiscal realist. I think that the budget is a reflection of our values, and so that does sometimes reflect hard choices. I show up. I'm a grinder. I do the work. I put in the time. I'm at the meetings, and I'm doing that work to try to earn that public trust. I think we can raise revenue. I think we can control our spending, and I think we can ease the burden on our taxpayers. And I do think that Amherst can get back on track when it comes to having a unified town government and a unified town spirit. I think we're on that path. So I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steinberg?
Yes, I promised to come back to the budget, and I am. Amherst has high expectations for public education, public safety, libraries, senior center, public works, parks, recreation, improvement of our roads and sidewalks. We've heard about numbers of different issues, also about affordable housing and achieving the climate action goals. Those all require money. And our major source of revenue is property tax. It can only go up 2.5% per year without an override. We have been against and have not asked for an operating budget override during that period of time. In order to do something, I'm committed to working on recognizing that there are strategies that we can take on that can look at revenue increases, and look forward to it and ask for your vote.
Thank you. Ms. Walker?
I am a 30-year-old single mother of 3. I have grown up in Amherst for my entire life, going through the school system and attending UMass. I am a renter. I am a member of the Finance Committee, the Elementary School Building Committee, and the former co-chair of the CSWG. And I am asking for your vote for re-election on November 7th. The value at the core of my candidacy is representation, because I believe that our community deserves to have a council that adequately represents the diversity that exists in this town. I will strive to be a counselor who listens to all of my constituents and who approaches all decisions with an anti-racist and climate justice lens. I am committed to finding new and creative ways to engaging the broader community and to increasing participation on boards, committees, and in positions of leadership. I want this position to be accessible to all people like me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Haneke?
Thank you to the League for hosting us this evening and to Kathy Campbell for moderating us so well. In my 2 terms on the council, I have proven that I can forge collaborative relationships to make Amherst a vibrant, healthy town that respects all voices, addresses climate change, tackles our housing crisis, and plans for the future in a fiscally responsible manner. During this term, I have co-sponsored legislation to increase the diversity of housing in town, generate more funding for affordable and attainable housing, reduce our energy usage, and improve our street lighting, and ensure access to health care. If re-elected, I'll continue working to meet our aggressive climate action goals, address our housing crisis, and improve our infrastructure. My experience and leadership have served the council well these past 5 years and will continue to do so if I'm re-elected. If you put your trust in me, I will continue working hard to represent you and all of Amherst residents well. You can find more information about my positions at votehaneke.org. Please cast one of your 3 at-large votes for me. Thank you.
Let's thank all our candidates. Thank you very much. Thank you to Amherst Media, who's been recording this and will be rebroadcasting it between now and the election. Thank you to all the league members who have worked as timers and question sorters and everything else that they've done. And don't forget to vote. It's been a pleasure being with you tonight. Thank you very much.